On Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My daughter disappeared after class, my sister kidnapped her and my mother covered it up. My family is going through a very difficult time. It all started when my sister tried to take my daughter last week, and the worst thing is that my mother is defending what she did. To better understand the situation, I should mention that about 6 months ago, my sister lost custody of her children because of her irresponsible behavior. It all started when her husband discovered that she had been unfaithful to him. He decided to make this betrayal public through Facebook, where everyone could find out. This led to a difficult divorce, but the problem was not just infidelity. The situation was much more complicated. My sister has been struggling with addiction for many years. Her problems started when she was still at school. She got involved with the wrong people and it ruined her life completely. Because of her drug and marijuana use, my sister stopped paying attention to her studies. In the end, she had to drop out of secondary school because she was too wrapped up in her problems. My parents did everything they could to help her during that time, but there comes a point when you can't do any more for someone who doesn't want to help themselves. After leaving school, her only option was to work as a waitress in a bar to earn money. There she met the man who would become her husband, who fell deeply in love with her. This encounter changed my sister's life. Only after meeting him did she finally agree to go to rehab to get the help she so badly needed. She recovered from her addiction and we all noticed a real change in her. She started a relationship with him, they got married and had 2 beautiful children. For a while, it seemed like everything was getting better and we were all so proud of how she had turned her life around. But everything changed about a year ago when my father passed away. His sudden death affected my sister more than anyone could have imagined. She fell into a deep depression. Since then, everything has been getting worse. We always encouraged her to seek professional help to talk about her feelings, but she refused, saying she didn't need a head doctor. I fully understand that grief is something very difficult to overcome and I myself am still mourning the loss of my father. However, when you are a parent, I believe that your children should be your top priority. Unfortunately, my sister didn't seem to understand this. After my father's death, she began to neglect her responsibilities as a mother and hardly spent any time with her children. In fact, she started leaving them at my house all day while her husband worked. She told me that she needed to go out with some friends to let off steam because she felt overwhelmed as a mother. At first, it didn't bother me. I work from home and my daughter, who is 11, really enjoyed playing with her cousins. So I helped my sister as much as I could. But after a few weeks, it started to become a burden. Taking care of 3 children while trying to work was too much. Sometimes she wouldn't even come to pick up her children until very late at night, after leaving them with me for hours. I found myself taking care of her children all day, every day, while she went out to have fun. It was then that her husband discovered that my sister had started using drugs again. He found her wandering around the park without her handbag and without shoes, completely disoriented. We had been trying to locate her all day and were very worried about what might be happening. When he found her and told us what had happened, it was clear that she had seriously relapsed into her addiction. My mother and I wanted to take her to a rehabilitation center immediately, but my sister refused. She insisted that she could handle everything on her own and that she couldn't abandon her children. We warned her several times, but she was too stubborn to accept the help she clearly needed. As expected, things did not improve. For a few weeks she seemed to try, but then she fell back into the same pattern. She would leave her children at my house without warning and disappear. This time, I decided to talk to her husband. I couldn't keep babysitting their children indefinitely and I wanted him to look for other options. I guess this made my sister's husband start to wonder where she was, which eventually led him to discover her infidelity. He found my sister sleeping with her drug dealer, and this ended their marriage. During the divorce proceedings, my sister's husband and his lawyer investigated her past and presented a very strong case against her. They made sure they gathered all the possible evidence about her history, her addiction problems, her negligence as a mother, and how she had failed to care for her children. The evidence was overwhelming and, as a result, my sister lost custody of her children. The judge ordered her to attend compulsory therapy and take steps to straighten her life out before she could even consider regaining custody of her children. Since then, my sister has been missing her children terribly. Every time she tries to call them, they refuse to speak to her. At first, I thought that maybe her ex-husband was preventing contact, but it turns out that's not the case. It's the children themselves who don't want anything to do with her. So now that my sister had no other obligations, she would go to her therapy sessions and then come to my house to spend the rest of the day with my daughter. She is constantly here and only leaves after dinner. The next day she comes back after breakfast, like clockwork. I even started to feel uncomfortable with her presence and encouraged her to spend time with other people too. But she refused, saying that being with my daughter was all she needed to feel good. It was clear that my sister was trying to fill the void left by her own children with mine. Even so, I didn't want to be insensitive to her, so I hoped that she would start to feel better over time. But as time went by, my sister's behavior became more invasive. At first, she constantly took my daughter out for ice cream every day, even though I clearly told her not to. When I explained that too much sweets is not good for any child, she replied that I needed to relax and that my daughter deserved to have fun with her. This made me realize that it was more about my sister trying to fill her own void than about doing what was best for my daughter. In addition, she always distracted my daughter from finishing her homework. She would tell her that she didn't need to study so hard, and that with her pretty face, she could always find a man to support her. This made me feel very uncomfortable, as it seemed to encourage my daughter to depend on others instead of focusing on her own independence. If I ever said anything to my sister about this, she would reply that she was also a mother and knew what she was doing. As the days went by and my sister was always at our house, I noticed that even my daughter had started to get annoyed with her. My daughter values her personal space, and seeing her aunt all the time in the house, constantly trying to play with her or interfere with her routine, began to make her feel overwhelmed and annoyed. On one occasion, my husband even jokingly said to my sister, "You know, with all the time you've been spending with us, you could just move in." He said it sarcastically, hoping she would take the hint and give us some space. To our surprise, however, my sister took it literally and said yes. She started to say that it was a fantastic idea and that she could be a full-time nanny for my daughter and help us out. Honestly, I was speechless. I had to explain to her that my husband was only joking and that we didn't need a nanny. My daughter is perfectly capable of looking after herself. This seemed to offend my sister. In fact, she argued that I was being selfish for not hiring her as a babysitter for our daughter. She claimed that, as a working professional, I hardly spend any time with my children. She insisted that she knew exactly how much attention a child needs and suggested that I was not giving enough to my daughter. According to her, I would be doing myself a favor by taking on this role. I was outraged by her audacity. There she was, implying that I was not capable of looking after my own daughter when she, an addicted mother who had lost custody of her own children, was somehow trying to give me parenting advice. The hypocrisy was unbelievable. I was so upset that I asked her to leave my house immediately. It was then that my sister realized how serious I was, and she apologized, saying that she hadn't meant to overstep the mark. In any case, last week was my daughter's birthday, and she really wanted to go to Disneyland. My husband and I agreed. We decided to take a few days off work and drive to Disneyland, hoping to spend more quality time together as a family. It was supposed to be a special trip, just the three of us, but when my sister found out about our plans, she insisted on joining us. Not only that, but she offered to take care of all the planning and hotel reservations for the trip. All my husband had to do, she said, was pay for it. At first, my husband and I thought it was a kind gesture. She seemed to want to help and we didn't think much of it. We thought that if she offered to plan the trip, it would be easier for us. We agreed to cover her expenses too. We never suspected anything was wrong. She seemed so excited to be part of the celebration, and we had no reason to think that her words meant anything more than her desire to participate in my daughter's special day. Just one day before my daughter's long-awaited birthday trip, something unexpected happened. My sister went to pick up my daughter from school, which was normal, but they did not return home as planned. I tried calling my sister, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I was overcome with worry, so I called my daughter's school to confirm that she had left with my sister. The school confirmed that she had indeed left with her, which reassured me a little, but it also raised more questions. After all, the school wasn't far from our house, so they shouldn't have taken that long to arrive. I tried to stay calm, thinking that they might have been slightly delayed. I decided to wait a little longer. However, after an hour and a half, when they still hadn't returned, I can't explain how, but I started to feel panic. I could feel inside that something wasn't right. At that moment, I also contacted my husband to explain the situation to him. He immediately started calling my sister too, trying to locate her. It didn't make sense. My sister didn't have any errands to run, and she would never purposely ignore my calls unless something was wrong. Where could they have gone? Why hadn't they returned yet? What worried me the most was that I knew my daughter would be hungry by now. It was always the first thing she mentioned after school. The idea that she was out there, possibly without food, not knowing when she would return home, made my anxiety increase. What was happening? Where were they? And most importantly, were they both okay? The uncertainty was unbearable, and I couldn't help but feel a growing fear. In the midst of my panic, I decided to call my mother to see if she had been in touch with my sister or if she knew anything about what was happening. At first, my mother assured me that she had no idea what was going on. But when I mentioned that I might need to call the police, my mother's tone changed immediately. I could hear the doubt in her voice as she let out a deep sigh. My mother paused before explaining, and I could tell she was choosing her words carefully. Your sister and your daughter are on their way to Disneyland. I was completely speechless. My mind couldn't process what my mother was saying. Why would my sister take my daughter to Disneyland, just the two of them? It didn't make sense. I tried to understand, but nothing about the situation made sense. I quickly replied to my mother, my voice trembling with confusion. But we were all supposed to go to Disneyland tomorrow. We have it all planned. Why would she just take my daughter like that? I don't understand. It was then that my mother explained everything. According to her, my sister had been planning this for some time. Apparently, she had felt very sad about not having had the opportunity to create special moments with her own children. And they no longer wanted anything to do with her. She had never been able to take her children to Disneyland. So, when my daughter expressed her desire to go there, she saw this as an opportunity to finally live that experience, but just her and my daughter. However, she knew that I would never agree to let her take my daughter alone. My heart sank when my mother told me that this was why my sister had simply picked up my daughter after school and gone to Disneyland without telling me anything. My mother added, she said that you and your husband are parents, so you could always take your daughter to Disneyland another time. But this time, she really wants this trip to be just for her and your daughter. She thinks it will be more special if it's just the two of them and she doesn't want you and your husband to accompany them. I was furious. I asked my mother how she knew so many details about what was going on. To my surprise, she confessed that my sister had been planning all this ever since we had allowed her to organize the trip. Since we let her take charge of the planning, she had made the hotel reservations and bought the tickets just for her and our daughter. And when she had told my mother the whole plan, at first she had tried to convince her not to do it. She even thought about telling me everything, but my sister had begged her not to, saying that her ex-husband had taken her children away from her and that she was very, very depressed. According to her, my daughter was the only good thing she had left. I had told my mother that I wanted to create some special memories with my daughter and that this trip would be my chance to do it. I shouted at my mother, demanding to know why she had hidden something so important. How could she have known about my sister's plan and not told me? Why had she allowed this to happen without saying a word? I felt completely betrayed, not only by my sister but also by my mother. She was supposed to be on my side. My mother tried to calm me down by saying that everything would be all right. She told me that my sister would eventually call me and explain everything once she arrived at the hotel with my daughter. She insisted that I stop worrying because my daughter was with her aunt and would be safe. Her words made me even more furious. I was beyond furious and I couldn't contain myself anymore. I told my mother, directly, that what my sister had done was basically a kidnapping. She had taken my daughter without my permission and now she was going to get a lesson that she would never forget. My mother tried to defend my sister, but I was not willing to listen to any more explanations or justifications. I ended the call with her and immediately dialed 911. I gave them the license plate number of my sister's car and explained that my daughter had been kidnapped. I told them that I was really worried about my daughter's safety with my sister, given her history of addiction and irresponsible behavior. I also called my husband and told him everything that was happening, and he was as shocked as I was. He couldn't believe that my sister would go to such lengths to take our daughter. It was an unforgivable betrayal and he was as shocked as I was. To cut a long story short, my sister was arrested. Apparently, when the officers stopped her car and tried to take her away, she resisted. In the end, they had to use force to restrain her and place her under arrest. Honestly, I didn't care about any of that and I was just relieved that my daughter was safe and back with us. When my daughter returned, she told us that my sister had lied to her, saying that my husband and I had refused to take her to Disneyland because we were too busy with work. My sister had apparently said that she was going to save her birthday by giving her the special gift of taking her on this trip, just the two of them. I felt terrible knowing that my sister had manipulated and lied to my daughter just to satisfy her own desires. Since my sister's arrest, my mother has not stopped calling me, bombarding me with accusations, blaming me for everything that happened. According to her, I am selfish and cruel for not allowing my sister to have a little happiness by taking my daughter on a trip. She insists that my sister's plan was not intended to hurt anyone and that all I had to do was keep my mouth shut, trust my sister and let her take care of my daughter. Am I the bad guy in this situation? Update 1. To be honest, the fear I felt when I couldn't find my daughter is something that only parents can really understand. It is a horrible feeling of helplessness and terror not knowing where your child is or if they are okay. I cannot even explain how my heart was racing, the terrible thoughts going through my mind and the heartbreaking pain of not being able to protect her at that moment. It is something no parent should ever have to experience and I wouldn't wish that fear on anyone. Many have asked me if I would have let my sister take my daughter if she had asked me first. My answer is definitely no. I don't trust my sister at all. She has never shown herself to be responsible or mature, not even with her own children. So how could I trust her with my daughter without knowing that she would be safe? I have seen for myself how my sister handles things and I know that my daughter's well-being would not be her main concern. What's more, my daughter doesn't even feel comfortable around my sister. For months, my sister has been invading our lives, crossing boundaries and creating tension. Until now, we had tried to be understanding with her, understanding that she had been through difficult times. But taking my daughter away without permission, that's something completely different. It's crazy. I mean, who does something like that? It doesn't make sense. My sister has crossed a line that I never thought she would cross, and there is nothing that can justify it. No matter what she has been through, what she did is unforgivable. My husband is so affected by all this that he hasn't been able to return to work this past week. He has been with our daughter the whole time, even sleeping on the floor next to her bed because he is afraid that my sister might show up and try to take her again. I have never seen him so upset, and I completely understand. After what happened, who wouldn't be nervous, wondering if a relative might show up and take your child? For now, my sister is facing serious charges for kidnapping and resisting arrest, and will soon have to appear before the judge. I have already contacted a lawyer, and we are processing a restraining order against her. I never thought I would have to do something like this, but I can't risk my daughter's safety in the future. As for my mother, she continues to defend my sister, which hurts me a lot. However, when the rest of the family found out my side of the story, they all supported me, unlike my mother. They have all expressed their support and understand why I had to have my sister arrested. They all see how serious the situation is and know that what my sister did was totally unacceptable. It comforts me to have their support, although that doesn't make the pain of all this any easier to bear. Update 2. Today my mother came to our house and yelled at me and my husband in front of our daughter. She immediately started accusing us of having no heart and ruining my sister's life. "You don't understand what she's been through," she shouted. "Your sister is suffering and you are only making it worse by pressing charges. How can you do this to your own sister? She's facing charges and it's all your fault." It was like being in a nightmare. There she was, blaming us for my sister's actions. She kept pointing the finger at me, accusing me of being cold and selfish for not letting my sister treat her depression by spending time with my daughter at Disneyland. She was just trying to get back some of what she lost, my mother said. Her eyes filled with tears. "She's not the same person she was before. You should have let your daughter spend time with your sister. It's not that big a deal." The idea that I was supposed to ignore everything, the attempt to take my daughter, the lies, the betrayal. I couldn't do it. I tried to stay calm and told my mother that it didn't matter if it was my sister, what she had done was not a simple mistake. She had taken our daughter on purpose and lied to her. I understood that she had lost her children, but that was because of her own actions. She was the one who had taken drugs, neglected her children, and cheated on her husband. I was glad they had taken her children away from her because no child deserves to grow up with such selfish parents. My husband, who had been quiet in front of my mother out of politeness, could no longer contain himself. He accused her of allowing my sister's behavior, pointing out how she had minimized the seriousness of the situation. He was direct in telling her that she had no right to speak to us like that. Especially after failing to stop my sister from carrying out her plan. His anger was evident as he made it clear that he wasn't going to let it pass no matter what she said to us. And that if it were up to him, he would make sure that my sister spent a long time in prison. I saw how my mother became enraged when she heard this. It was as if she could not accept the reality of what had happened. I told her that I agreed with my husband and that defending my sister's behavior did not help anyone. But my mother just kept repeating that my sister had nothing left and that family is family. She told me that we should support her no matter what, and that I had betrayed them by getting her arrested. As I remained firm in my position, my mother finally said something that hurt me deeply. "You know what? If you don't drop the charges against your sister, then you can't be part of my family. You are no longer my daughter. I'm going to cut you out of my inheritance. I'm doing it because of what you've done to your sister. You've ruined her life and I won't forgive you for it." She went on to say that she couldn't even bear to look at my face. "You've become someone I don't recognize," she said to me with contempt. "I raised you better than this. How can you be so cruel to your own flesh and blood? Your sister has already suffered enough, and instead of supporting her, you've turned on her like a wild animal." Her words stung like a slap in the face. My mother was twisting everything, making me look like the bad guy. Now she was using threats about money to make me feel guilty. I couldn't believe it. Not only was she blaming me for my sister's irresponsible actions, but now she was also punishing me for protecting my own daughter. At that moment, I knew there was no point in talking to her anymore. It was obvious that she was as beside herself as my sister, so I asked her to leave. But my mother wasn't finished. "You're going to regret this," she said, staring at me as if she thought I would give in to the pressure. "You're going to regret ruining your sister's life. I'm going to make sure of that." Since then, my husband and I have decided that we need to install cameras around the house. We have already ordered them. We feel that it is the only way to guarantee our safety and privacy after everything that has happened. Although my mother's reaction devastates me, I know that I have to stand firm. My daughter is my priority now, no matter what my mother says. I cannot let her or my sister manipulate me into putting my daughter in danger. Update 3. It's been a while since my last update. Today was finally the court hearing for our case. Although it seemed that my mother had hired the best lawyers to defend my sister, it didn't do them much good. The evidence against my sister was overwhelming. She had literally kidnapped my daughter, and there was no way to justify her actions. My sister tried to present herself as a victim, saying that she only wanted to save my daughter's birthday. But the court didn't believe her. They saw through her manipulation and lies. The fact that she had resisted arrest and even fought with the police only made her situation worse. The court finally found my sister guilty of kidnapping and resisting arrest. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison. In the end, we were also granted restraining orders against both my sister and my mother. The court's decision was clear. The fact that my mother had not intervened to protect my daughter meant that she had failed in her duty as a mother and grandmother. The judge recognized the seriousness of the situation, admitting that my mother's permissive behavior posed a real danger to the safety of our family. The restraining orders were necessary to avoid future problems and ensure that we could move forward without fear of further manipulation or danger. I honestly never thought it would come to this. To have to take such extreme measures to protect my daughter from the very people I once trusted the most. But in the end, my daughter's safety and well-being have to come first, no matter the cost. I am truly happy that everything worked out for us.